All right. Welcome, everyone, to Integrating Research and Demonstration into Your Producer-Led Watershed Grant. I will be joined by, I'm Danny Heisler, the Producer-Led Program Manager with the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. And I'll be joined by Wrangler Jones, our Conservation Agronomist, and Abby Augarten from UW-Madison Division of Extension, the On-Farm Research Program Manager. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Abby and let you get started in the presentation. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Slides showing up okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yep, as Danny said, my name's Abby Augarten. I'm the On-Farm Research Coordinator with UW-Madison Division of Extension. And to get the conversation started today, Danny asked that I talk a little bit about research and demonstration, giving an overview of those strategies and their goals and some considerations if you're interested in starting up a new project. There's a lot of value of on-farm experimentation as a way to test and try out new practices and see what fits for you and your farm operations. And I know the producer-led watershed groups really do an amazing job at experimenting with new practices, really finding innovative solutions to some of the challenges they're facing in terms of integrating conservation and sharing those out. And I do often think of research and demonstration as two tools that we have to evaluate the impacts of these practices we're experimenting with, as well as facilitate shared learning around them. And through farmer-led on-farm research and demonstration in particular, this really presents a great opportunity to investigate those practices that are most of interest to your farms and your communities. And with that, you can gain really practical information on how these practices perform for your specific fields, management, and equipment relative to your goals. So really getting that local insight, really applied knowledge that we don't often get if something happens at a research station far away from our own farms. It's also a really great opportunity to share out local insights with other farmers or folks in the community and bring people together to learn from that farmer-led on-farm research and demonstration project. And we also have collaborative research and demonstration projects that really connect farmers throughout the state around shared questions. And because we have such diversity of systems and soils and operations across the state, we can get a more comprehensive understanding of how these practices perform throughout the state. We can learn more quickly when we come together around these shared questions. And then we could share out recommendations from that collaborative projects that other farmers can tap into. So that presents a really great opportunity as well. So really we're able to walk away with some really tangible insights for one's own individual farm, but we also have that great ripple effect into communities and throughout the state through shared learning. And when I think about different strategies to investigate practices, I do group them by research and demonstration, and also a simple data collection could be a great tool to, start to investigate practices and really use data-driven insights to inform management. And each one of these do have their own unique goals, though there are certainly overlap in that we could have projects that really are trying to tackle multiple goals at once. But with research, our aim is typically to evaluate a new practice, product, or technology. And with that, we take on a slightly more scientifically rigorous approach than a demonstration project, where our primary goal is to showcase a new practice, product, or technology. And then with data collection, this is where we're taking different samples or metrics or indicators and using that to monitor and track what's happening on our fields. And today, to get us started, we're going to delve into each one of these in a bit more detail. But before we do, I want to pause here. I know that producer-led watershed groups are doing really great work with research and demonstration programming. And I know it's a little awkward to do this in a webinar versus if we were in person, but would love to take some time for folks to share out if they're doing any research or demonstration, perhaps this year or last year, on their own farms or with your groups. This could be a good opportunity to learn what folks are doing and, get inspired and maybe take some ideas with them into their upcoming grant. So is there anyone brave enough to drop something in the chat or come off mute? I know it's more fun in person, but no. Okay, well, if anything comes to mind, please do feel free to use the chat as we go ahead. I know other folks would value hearing what folks are working on. Ooh, cover crops and fertilizer amounts for demo plots for corn, soy, and wheat. Thank you, Jackie. Ooh, a nice link for us to check out. Thank you, Sarah. I think one of the things that that I really love is that we can tackle a long list of questions utilizing research and demonstration. Some are certainly easier done than others, and some can be, more complicated. But when we're thinking about addressing watershed conservation questions and goals, we can explore topics like cover cropping and tillage, manure and nutrient management, perennial forages and grazing, new technology, equipment and products, integrated pest management, and the list goes on. So there's a lot of different questions we can ask and things that can explore. Certainly won't be able to go into all of the potential topics in today's webinar, but I know myself and my colleagues at UW Extension and folks at DACCAP's Producer-Led Watershed Protection Grant Program as well would love to help folks brainstorm and think about new projects for their upcoming grant. So let's dive into each one of these strategies with a bit more depth. With research, our primary goal, as I said, is to evaluate a new practice, product, or technology, or aim to fine-tune an existing practice on the farm. Here in this example, it's a comparison of, a termination timing of a cover crop followed by corn. And we're typically testing a specific question or hypothesis. And really that question is going to guide the research project, inform what sort of data we need to collect, how to set up the research trial, and so forth. And ultimately, we have the goal of quantifying effects of that practice. So this could be effects to yield, return on investment, key conservation metrics, or other indicators of interest. And since we do have that goal of quantifying effects, it typically takes on a bit more scientifically rigorous approach so that we have confidence at the end of the season with what we're learning about how that practice performed, and can use that information to inform decision making, either on our own farms or to contribute to broader recommendations that other folks can tap into to inform management on their own farms. And one of the things that we often encounter with agricultural research in general is we're working in a lot of, in-field variability. So if we're trying to quantify effects such as, a practice's impact on yield, but we're working with, a yield monitor map like this, where we have a wide range of performance due to inherent, soil texture and type, slope, drainage, or other sources of variability, it can be really challenging to tease out, if there was a yield effect, was that due to the practice or was that due to some of our in-field variability? We also see, different historical field management can influence results. This is a photo of a non-uniform cover crop seeding where emergence just didn't take in certain areas of the field. We could have planter or equipment error. This is a photo of a skipped fertilizer pass. So these things happen, which can add to one layer of complexity when we're trying to evaluate the impacts of a certain practice. So we can think of a lot of research strategies that, can help us investigate these practices. We're certainly not going to go into many of them today, but I wanted to highlight what are some differences between a research trial and a demonstration plot, for example. So typically with a research trial, we're going to be answering questions with 2 or more treatments and proper controls. So for example, does product X improve yield and return on investment? to really tackle this question, we're going to have 2 treatments with product X and our baseline no product X control. Another really important one is replication. So this is the act of putting out each one of those treatments more than one time in the field. In this diagram here, we're looking at each of those treatments were repeated 4 times, but even just repeating something twice in the field is going to make a huge difference when we start thinking about, evaluating the potential effect of any in-field variability and really walking away from that trial with more confidence in, how that practice performed. And then I'm sure everyone's favorite statistical analysis is another tool that we could utilize to really answer the question, did that treatment influence our results, or could random error or variability have influenced it? So just some of the things to consider with a research trial to really, again, tackle that overarching goal of evaluating that effect of the certain practice. As you can imagine, it can be a fair bit of work and more logistically challenging. So that is one downside, but there are, a lot of folks in the state who are willing and eager to support folks who are interested in taking on a research trial. Next, we have demonstration. So with a demonstration, our primary goal is showcasing a new practice, product, or technology. Here, we really want to facilitate farmer-to-farmer learning. It's a great opportunity to gain comfortability with a new practice, both for folks, coming out to a field day and seeing that practice in action, but even for, the host themselves who's trying out the demonstration plot. So if you want to try something new and not quite ready to delve into a research trial, but still want to, make observations, share out that practice with others, a demonstration could be a really great fit and first step. Because we don't have that overarching goal of quantifying effects with a demonstration, we have a lot more flexibility in different demonstration approaches. So you could simply go out and for a whole field, implement a new practice, or on a part of the field, you can try out new equipment and host a field day to see that piece of equipment in action. So a lot of different opportunities there. You can have a comparison within the field. So this is an example of a single test strip within your field with business as usual on the surrounding sides, splitting a field in half with half the field being in a new practice and half the field being your business as usual, or putting in some, small demonstration plots could be a great option as well. So with these sort of setups, they are easier to implement than that full research trial, right? There's less logistics to think about, which can be really helpful to then still have something really powerful and effective without that much legwork on the front end. One thing to be mindful of is these are really valuable to make observations, see those practices in action, but we want to have some caution if we're trying to quantify effects, since we really don't know and can't tease out the role of, in-field variability, error, and things like that. But there are still some strategies we can implement with demonstration, so we do feel more confident in those results. And I'm always happy to talk through some of those strategies with folks who are interested in, improving quality of demonstrations. And lastly, we do have replicated research trials on here, right? This would be a great venue to host a field day, share out results, share the data that we're learning from that research trial as well. So this goes back to, while we have different goals, we could have, nothing is mutually exclusive. So a research trial would make a wonderful host to showcase that practice as well. And lastly, we have data collection. So data collection could be, taking different samples or using different metrics or indicators from the farm to really monitor and track what's happening on your fields. This could be, crop performance indicators like yield and quality. It could be cover crop biomass analysis and nutrient uptake. We could soil sample for routine soil fertility, soil health, nitrate and ammonium, pest metrics as well. This is an example of monitoring for slugs. So there's a whole wealth of different indicators and metrics that can be explored and really finding ones that align with your goals. could be an easy first step to utilizing on-farm data to inform management. Here we might be comparing data across seasons or to benchmarks rather than really trying to tackle a question, a research question. But what I really love about using data collection and sampling strategies is the opportunity for collaborative surveys. So some folks might be familiar with this approach to research, but essentially the goal is if a lot of people are taking soil health samples, for example, we could bring all of that data together, look at the aggregate data and information from the farmers to contextualize it, and it can help inform, some major trends that we might see. For example, how inherent soil texture can influence soil health results or the role that management can play. So these collaborative surveys could be a really great opportunity to get a lot more people involved with minimal effort, right? It's a lot easier to go out and take a soil sample than it would be to implement a whole research trial, but we can learn a lot when we come together in these sorts of projects. Just to highlight this one a little bit more, this is an example of a project organized through Michael Fields, the Nature Conservancy, USDA, and University of Wisconsin. It's the Wisconsin Cover Crop Data Network. And I think some folks on the call here today might even be participating in this. But this is an example where farmers, sign up and they measure cover crop biomass from their farms. They get a forage quality and a nutrient analysis of their cover crop biomass. And then all of that data comes together and folks can explore the aggregate data set to find trends or perhaps new things to investigate on their own farms. So this is just a screenshot of the dashboard looking at cover crop planting date along the horizontal axis and fall cover crop biomass along that vertical axis. And we can see trends on how management indicators might influence those biomass measures. So definitely encourage folks to check out this website if they're interested in exploring the dashboard more. And as I wrap up before I hand it over, I want to just highlight that what's really neat is we do have strategies that range in intensity. So whether you're looking for a low effort type of project or something that is more intensive, there's definitely something for everyone. For example, if you're interested in investigating the forage potential of cover crops on your farm, you can explore data collection, measure cover crop biomass, and analyze it for forage quality, explore some of that aggregate cover crop data to see if there's anything you want to check out on your own farm. You can also set up a demonstration. So this would be more in that middle effort, a side-by-side comparison of different cover crop species or mixes. Great opportunity to observe the performance of those cover crops on your farm and host a field day to share with others what you're seeing. And then lastly, that more intensive option would be research. Maybe you're interested in tackling the question, how does integrating a cover crop influence yield, forage inventory, and profitability, right? So this would be a replicated research trial of cover crop and no cover crop control, where you could collect, analyze data and see if that practice meets or aligns with your goals. So definitely lots of opportunities for alignment, both with goals and capacity. And lastly, I know before I hand it over, I know Wrangler and Danny are going to talk about some collaborative research and demonstration projects that folks can tap into if they're of interest. But I also want to highlight if anyone is interested in exploring other research and demonstration projects within their group and want to brainstorm ideas or looking for feedback or, looking for any sort of support, that myself, colleagues at UW Extension and at DACAP are available to support those efforts. And lastly, here are some resources that I will also drop in the chat for folks who are looking for more guidance on conducting on-farm research. So thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Abby. Thank you for the wonderful presentation and great explanation, just kind of differentiating the three. And with that, we will lead into Wrangler. He'll share a little bit about this year's pilot project, where we've been working on a demonstration and research project within the Producer-Led program. So, Wrangler?
Let's see if I can share this. You seeing that?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, like Danny said, my name is Wrangler Jones. I'm the conservation agronomist with DACAP. I'm going to talk a little bit about our producer-led demonstration plots. It was kind of a pilot program this year that we decided to do. So it was kind of pick and choose around the state. But about a year and a half ago, we got together with a couple of UW extension people, and we're kind of looking for a way to find a way to bridge the gap between middle and late, or for middle and late adapters on conservation. Like, how can we get more conservation on the ground with these farmers? And so the producer-led program obviously is going to be the best option for that, just because they're all over the state. There's a lot of farmers involved with them. I mean, they're always looking to get more farmers involved with their group too. So this just seemed like a perfect fit. The producer-led group, they're farmer to farmer, so it's not a lot of I don't know, data that doesn't really matter, I guess. And our goal is we want more consistent data across the state. So by making these replications across the state, we're going to get more consistent data, making it hopefully easier for these middle and late adapters to want to try these practices or think about getting other conservation practices on their farm. And by doing this as well, we're able to create protocols with the best success, getting all that data together and, what works, what doesn't work. And so that seemed like to be the best fit for these experiments. So what we're doing this year is we are interseeding winter rye into V3 to V7 corn. So we kind of sat around and thought about what would be one of the best ways to try to get farmers to try cover crops. And we thought, drones are big talking point. It seems like everywhere. So what can we do to incorporate a drone? And we chose winter rye because winter rye is kind of more of like a gateway cover crop. Like it seems like it's almost foolproof most of the time. And then V3 to V7 corn, we did some research and found that established rye at V3 to V7 corn doesn't really affect yield on corn. So maybe these farmers are more interested in getting it on earlier. The farmers could have all these goals too, if they're looking for more for soil health aspects, if they're trying to increase organic matter on their farm, if they're trying to increase infiltration. I know spring and early summer, especially this year, has been wet. So what can we do to keep that water in our field and not traveling to neighbors? If they're looking for additional income, if there's these cover crops growing, can they talk to their neighboring producers that may have cattle or some sort of grazing livestock that they could incorporate this into their program, also incorporating the livestock for the soil health benefits? Is that going to be able to save them some money as well? If they get livestock on there, they're going to need less fertilizer maybe in the future, or maybe they don't need as much chemicals either, just because of the aggressiveness that winter rye has against competing crops and weeds. So that brings me down to weed control, and then the nutrient scavenging. Is there less nutrients getting leached or running off? So kind of what we did for a setup, we asked the farmers. I should go back. We had four farmer groups within the state that are doing it, with 8 farmers total. So we have Buffalo Trempealeau group. We have the Farmers of Lemonwire, which is Juneau County. We have Epic, which is over by Marathon County, and then we have a group down in Dane County. So kind of all across the state, a little bit of different topography and stuff, and what they're dealing with. So we asked farmers to choose a marginal or less productive field, just because we thought this is probably where we're going to see the best benefit for this practice. And every farmer knows which field they have that's either marginal or less productive, so that should be easy for them. For this, we asked for it to be no-till with no manure applied as well, and that's going to be corn. And then we're asking for replications, like Abby mentioned earlier. Replications are important to get consistent data. And so, or some of them are doing areas big enough that we can take multiple checks. For the drone seeding, we kind of gave this as a template for the farmers to deal with, just so they have a rough idea. We have to leave a buffer strip just because of how the accuracy on drone application can be. And we figured we have to leave that buffer wide enough for a pass with a harvester or a combine to go across. And at the beginning of this, before they were planted, we took soil respiration tests, which is they take the soil and measure how much CO2 is being released, which kind of gives you a rough idea of how much soil microbial activity is happening. And then we took slate tests as well, measuring the aggregability of the soil. And then we're going to take some tests once everything comes off as well. Talk about that here in a second. But this is kind of how it's going so far. So we see a lot more success. A lot of these pictures on the left are all from across the state. We see the rye has established really well. It's not competing with the corn. We do have one outlier, the one in the red on the right. That was more of a weed control management issue. That's water hemp taking over the field, especially in the plot area. There is rye growing underneath it, though, I promise. But it's just kind of hard to manage the weed control, and this is why we're getting this data across the state on what farmers are doing for their weed control to make this program work. So 1 out of 8 farmers had problems, so I figured that was a pretty good result, and it was something that probably could be mitigated pretty easily. We also had the hard part with this was these farmers are very progressive in their groups. So asking them to plant just a single species mix was kind of hard, just because they're already past that. But getting the message across to them, we're trying to get farmers that are just trying to dip their toes into conservation practices. So they agreed with us that winter rye would probably be the easiest. But we had some farmers go out and do some other interesting plots as well. So we had a couple farmers that planted annual ryegrass in theirs. We had a group, or one from Dane County and one from Buffalo-Trempealeau County. If you look on the left, those two are annual ryegrass. Doesn't look much different than our winter rye. The cool thing is the third one in, that's annual ryegrass, also planted at the same rate, but that's a guess row or split row or the planter plug. He couldn't tell, but the fact that much sunlight makes a difference in kind of keeping that rye under control, I thought was pretty cool. And then we also had a multi-species mix that one of the farmers did. That was a mix of clover, radish, turnips, and rapeseed. And so kind of some of the things we've learned so far with this, the timing, it can be good, it can be bad. Weed control, it kind of makes it kind of tough trying to plan when that corn is going to be interseeded to make sure your weed control is the best it can be. And then the good part is, it's been kind of a wet spring, so our drone was able to go places and do stuff maybe an interseeder couldn't, or you couldn't get with a broadcasting machine either. The species, we did a 60-pound rate on our winter rye. That seemed kind of heavy, especially for a drone, but this is kind of for research purposes, and this is what farmers were interested in. We're trying to get some biomass produced just to see if we can take a forage analysis next spring and kind of tell how much is the feed value of what our overwintered cover crops was. I know some farmers are going to, drone seeding is probably the best for some lower seeding mixes just to make it worth more. We're kind of looking at our weed control. We can save our money. You know, some people aren't adding the residuals like they need to, or they're not doing as many passes. Some of these farmers did have winter rye planted on here before. They terminated that before they even planted their corn. We also learned that the availability of drone applicators, especially in the spring, is very high, just because they're not doing, you know, fungicide then or interseeding in late season crops. So the availability to find a drone applicator was pretty easy as well. So our goals for this winter, next spring, is we're going to take some soil samples to kind of compare the strips to see if there's really a difference. We're going to take some yield checks just to see if that rye is actually taking anything away from the corn. We're also doing the forage analysis, some biomass analysis, and then we'll take the slate test again to see if that cover crop has improved the agribility in that short amount of time. So more to come. We're kind of planning on doing, like Abby and Danny said, more protocols to get farmers introduced to these other practices. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments or anything, or unmute.
All right, thank you so much, Wrangler. And we will have time for questions at the end of the presentation also. But yeah, we're really excited about the first year of the progress with the research and demonstration projects. And so that's kind of led us into continuing on with the project and asking the producers that have been involved what topics are really of interest, so we can continue to develop out protocols that seem to work for the project. It's data that's, you know, for farmers, that's collected by farmers. So we try to keep it very, very practical and easy to collect. I think we've also found that some of the data collection forms within the protocol seem to be really helpful, just kind of keeping track of everything that's going on in their current planting systems, and just helping kind of get a little bit more shifted towards consistency in collection. So with that, we will kind of talk about what's next on the list for this year. We've been working closely, or DATCAV's been working closely with UW Extension to help develop out some of those thoughts and questions that producers have had as far as what's next and what can we continue to do some collaborative research on. And so we are working on a suite of options where there will be a library of different protocols available, kind of a plug and play. You can grab them and incorporate whatever works best into your specific farm or your group, but knowing that the protocols all create that consistency in how we're managing for these different plots, and then also the data collection, so we can bring all of those data points back and share them out collaboratively and be able to really start plotting some points on the map that are that are demonstrating this replicable data. So with that, I'm also going to ask Abby to join me on these next two slides to talk a little bit about what we've been working on. So Abby, I'm going to
Thanks.
let you share.
Awesome. Thank you, Danny. In terms of protocols that we have going for the upcoming 2026 grant, we wanted to create a build off of that interseeded cover crops and corn grain protocol that Wrangler just talked about, and create some diversity for other systems and intensities for folks to tap into exploring cover crops on their farm. So we have two research and demonstration protocols, the first being the interseeded cover crops and corn grain that Wrangler just introduced. So here that goal is to evaluate the effect of cereal rye interseeded at V4, or maybe it was V3, sorry, Wrangler, between V3 and V7 on corn grain yield, soil coverage, and forage potential. But then we also have a protocol for corn silage systems where we're investigating cover crop species diversity following corn silage, where the goal is to evaluate the effect of a multi-species cover crop mix compared to a single species on yield, forage potential, soil coverage, and some short-term soil health metrics. With that one, since we do know that the window for cover crop seeding after corn silage is smaller for some of those multi-species mixes, we do include flexibility in terms of cover crop seeding timing and method to really support folks in selecting the methodology that's going to set them up for the most success. With both of these protocols, they are research and demonstration. So again, encouraging replication and would support data collection of, we'll be monitoring cover crop biomass, nutrient analysis, and forage quality of that biomass, as well as yield and some other add-on metrics if folks are interested. And then lastly, the one on the right as our lower point of entry option, there's been a lot of great enthusiasm around using drones as a tool to seed cover crops into a standing crop. But there's still a lot of questions around what we can expect for cover crop establishment and biomass accumulation from a drone seeding based off of the timing, what sort of species, what the growing conditions are. Do we have good soil moisture? And the list goes on, but it presents a really great opportunity, especially thinking about, right, those narrower windows in the fall and the potential to increase species diversity by seeding into standing corn silage or seeding it into standing soybean at 50% leaf drop. So this is more of an informal survey type project where there could be a lot of participation for folks who are drone seeding their cover crops into standing crops. And we would just take some data or measure cover crop biomass and collect some data in order to try to better understand those expectations around the practice.
Awesome.
Do you want me to handle this?
Yeah, if you want to.
In terms of approximate budget, it is going to vary a little bit between, from each trial's specifics. But this is a snapshot so that folks can start to anticipate, how much should be budgeted if they're interested in participating. For each one, there's, cover crop seed and seeding that could be covered by the grant itself. And that would vary a bit by the trial area, as well as, what you're seeding and the method. But then we do also have the cost in here for each one for the lab analyses that would go along with each protocol, as well as sampling equipment, a hanging scale and a quadrat and any other tools you would need for biomass sampling. And then the opportunity to include a farmer stipend for participating as well. And happy to, support folks, myself and Danny, if they're interested in investigating or including these projects into their grant and tailoring them to their specific trials.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Danny?
Yeah, I think it was important to us that we kind of lay these potential projects out before the producer-led grant deadline in the middle of September, just to kind of share some of the opportunities that are coming and the potential costs that might be associated with them. If groups are interested in kind of adopting some of these and considering looking at them for next year, so you have some numbers to consider putting into the budget. So with that, I'm just going to share a couple slides that talk a little bit about the budgeting component for demonstration and research. And many of the participants on the call have already incorporated demo and research in their grants historically. But for any groups that are either new to considering this option or are new groups just getting established, I just kind of wanted to share a few snips of what this looks like and how to incorporate it into the actual grant application. And fortunately, Shauna Minnick, our conservation grant specialist, is also on the call to help answer any in-depth questions that might arise. So On the left, you'll see page 6 of the 2026 producer-led grant application, and you'll see about 2/3 of the way down under conservation, demonstration, and education that is one of the budget categories that can be chosen. And so you'll see on the right side just an example from a group that had utilized this in their application previously, where they have just their budget category, which is simply numeric, just based on how it fit in the lineup, but they very kind of blanket chose to put in conservation, demonstration, and education with a simple sub-budget category of demo plots, and then a general, just a general grant request for an allocation for that. We do have some groups that get more in depth with their sub-budget categories, breaking that out by seed cost or farmer honoraria, but we don't have that expectation. So you can really leave it pretty simple in how you're including this in your grant application. So following this, in the winter, at the end of the grant cycle, that's when you would submit your grant reimbursements that are all due by February 15th. And again, just a couple examples of what this might look like. On the left side, we simply see the receipts that would be associated with the project. So while we don't need the pieces itemized by line, whether it's different seed or application or farmer honoraria, we do still need all the accompanying receipts that would be part of the project. So those can be pretty simply just scanned in or put into a PDF and sent in with the reimbursements. And then on the right side, you can see how the demo and research is simply a line and asking for a total for reimbursement. And I'm going to ask Shauna if there's anything that you'd like to mention or clarify in this that while we're on these talking about the reimbursement still.
I can't think of anything else to add, Danny. Thank you. I haven't run into any problems. The way everybody's been handling it on their reimbursements so far has been great, but happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
All right. Good. So with that, I think it was a great presentation today. Thanks again, Abby and Wrangler, for sharing what's on the horizon and what we're doing this year. And so with that, I'm going to open this up for any questions for any component of the presentation. And also, as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and will be available for playback, which will be on the Producer-Led webpage. And as we get a little closer into the fall, we have all of the specific protocols will be listed on the Producer-Led webpage and available. And we'll send that out in the listserv, linking to the protocols and just providing a little bit more information. But we'll be a little farther down in the fall once they've been reviewed by a few more folks. So, but we wanted to make sure this webinar was available in time before the grant deadline, just to kind of get some ideas rolling, but wanted to offer those protocols a little bit later this fall. So let me pull up some questions.
Danny,
right.
Before people skedaddle off the call, I do want to highlight, I did just drop a form in the chat. We do want to continue to expand the collaborative protocols, as Danny mentioned, and create a menu that folks can tap into. So we'd love to learn more about what sort of research protocols you all are looking for. So if folks don't mind filling out that form, that would be really helpful, or always feel free to reach out to either of us as well.
Yeah, Thanks, Abby. We're looking forward to seeing some of that feedback and just helping develop out what's next on the horizon. But we do have a couple questions. So Tonya asked, when you say per field, does that mean a certain size of plot or acres? Abby, you did respond to that, but do you want to maybe just describe that a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So in that we do mean per field. It is based on the number of replicates. So that example, there was 4 replicates. If you have fewer replicates, you would need less money for that sampling cost. In the protocols themselves, we do provide some guidance on trial area. What length of strips would be important to implement based off of your equipment and whatnot, but there is no that wasn't based off of the size of plots or strips. It was based per field.
Then the next question, is there a specific multi-species cover crop mix that must be used? Or as far as this year, where we had a multi-species mix that was used, that was very farmer dependent. But I think as we move forward, Abby, do you want to talk a little bit about that in the next upcoming protocol?
Yeah, in the single versus multi-species protocol, we do have guidance of, wanting it to be an overwintering cover crop, likely comparing cereal rye to a mix that's cereal rye, legume, and brassica, with some recommendations of ratios for that. And I'm happy to provide more detail, but that will really help tackle the answer or, help answer the question in a coordinated way. So.
All right, thank you. Okay, and then one more question. Can you clarify, is DATCAP limiting what demos and research can be done with the producer-led funds to only the options you've explained? Great question. Thank you, Tina. That is absolutely not what we're doing. We want to have it as inclusive as the groups want to do demonstration and research. We're just trying to offer some opportunities to have some consistent data collection throughout the state where we have replicable data that can be shared back, kind of comparing those points across groups and across parts of the state. But no, definitely to your question, we encourage all demo and research, whatever it looks like from each group is great. We just wanted to kind of continue to develop out this idea and create some more continuity between options. And once again, just a reminder, we will have those protocols available in early October, and when those come out, we'll send out some information through the listserv where they're linked and just the total protocols. So is there any other questions before we log off today? All right. I'm not seeing any. So thank you again, Abby and Wrangler, for joining us today and all the great information. I'm looking forward to seeing the creative projects that happen this year and watching that data be collected. So thank you everyone for joining us.